everyone. I'm Erin Thompson of Everyday Expressions. Thanks so much for joining me. Today I'm excited to share a little twist on some new products from the Picket Fence Studios Bake the World a Better Place release. I'm using the Scene Building Cookie Making Die Set. I know, it's designed to be cookies. It's really cute with all of the swirls and different styles of cookies. But since it's close to Valentine's Day, I thought it would be cute to create chocolates scattered around the new large Hooray die. So let's get started. Now, when I did start with this new set, I did think that I wanted to create some cookies, and I began with placing all of the dies on my magnetic mat for my die machine, and I cut out a whole, but I just started die cutting to have a whole bunch of pieces that I could use any way that I wanted. And so I die cut them all out of white. And what I wanted to show you here is that I actually use these little mini muffin plastic containers to sort out all of my little pieces. So I keep some of these in the craft room, and they're perfect for sorting ephemera and little die cuts to help you stay organized when you're creating a new card. So what happened was I did start with the white ones, and I did create a card with cookies that I'll share a picture of at the end of this video. But then I had the inspiration to create the chocolates. So I tried to make my life easier by then die cutting from dark brown cardstock, Nina Desert Storm, kind of a khaki craft cardstock, and then a creamy white cardstock. And my idea was that it would make my life a lot easier to start with solid color cardstock and then ink them to create dark chocolates, milk chocolate, and white chocolates. So now you can see that I've taken the dark brown cardstock die cut pieces and I've added those to the small paper palette and ink them up. You can see I tried several oxide colors of brown before I actually settled on using black soot to add a shaded edge to each of the pieces. And I think that actually finally achieved the look I was going for. Now on these, I've taken the Nina Desert Storm die cut pieces and inked with walnut stain oxide ink first for the light milk chocolate look. And then I go in with ground espresso just around the edges for the shading. I love all of the different shapes in this cookie die set. I think they were just perfect to ink in creating chocolates. And now I'm adding the cream color pieces to the painter's palette. I love that the new, I said painter's palette, I apologize, it's a paper palette. I love that these are sticky, and it's perfect when working with these little die cut pieces. It holds it, and it was very easy to ink around. So I just added a little bit of vintage photo around the edges of the white chocolates for some shading. It didn't take much, just a little bit. So something I forgot to add in previously is that while I had all of the dies out, I cut several of the scalloped and round shapes from one of my favorite vellum papers. And I was thinking these would look really cute as the tissue papers, the little cups that hold the chocolates in a box. So I've taken a paper pouncer and I'm inking it with pink ink. I get them, and what I'm going to do is actually turn them over. It looks pretty when you use the other side, and just a little hint of color comes through. And one tip I have for you when doing this is to make sure that your vellum, the ink on the vellum dries. It will stay wet for a little while because it doesn't actually soak into the vellum. So you either want to dry those with a heat gun or set them aside to dry, or else you'll have a mess with ink everywhere. So just give it a little time to dry. And you saw in the last clip while I was talking about the vellum that I quickly added all the little bits and pieces, the frosting, the hearts, and I just once again used the paper palette to hold those down while I inked with my paper pouncers, and got them all inked in shades of red and pink, and even some dark chocolate browns again. And that way, those are all the little pieces on top of the chocolate to add detail, like, a swirl of dark chocolate or light chocolate, and then the little hearts. I just think they're so cute. And one little tip I have here, I get a little heavy-handed with glue. I'm kind of like a kindergartner with glue, and I can have a tendency to get it everywhere. And even though I have a fine tip on my glue bottle, and many times when you get glue here and there, you kind of can't see extra little dots. I will say I got a little heavy-handed on a couple of my chocolate swirls, and it did show in my pictures. And to be honest, I was a little disappointed in that. So if I had this to do over again, a little tip that I've seen other designers do is they will add glue to a piece like that, and then maybe have a sheet of paper, scrap paper, or a paper towel, and they'll gently dab off just a little bit of glue before taking it to your finished kind of project. And that way you don't have any of that overrun of the glue. And I really wish that I had done that for these. Like I said, I didn't notice it at first, and or if I did, I really thought it would dry clear. But so don't look too hard. But in my final picture, there are a couple of little glue smears that you can see on top of my chocolates. But in the end, it's cute, and it's all good. It's handmade, right? But there's a little tip for you. I would highly recommend that, or even using just a little bit of like a tape runner on the back to adhere those. You can see, I think it's that one I just did. It gets a little messy. So dab those off on a paper towel. So I've just layered up. I'm using the different pieces of chocolate, or I wish it were chocolate, but cardstock, and then layering them up. And look how pretty that dark red looks on that piece of white chocolate. So, so cute. And then I've added them, adhered them to the vellum. Now I'm using the new Hooray focal point die. This is very large. It takes up almost an entire A2 size card. And I'm going to die cut it out of a piece of Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock. If you follow me, you know I love this cardstock. I use it all the time. It's actually a mixed media paper, and it can take a lot of water or mixed media product. I knew that it would hold up well with the red velvet cake paper glitz that I wanted to add to this. This is a yummy new dark red color paper glitz. It's got some metallic flakes in it, and it's this deep, dark, rich red color. And I knew this color would look fantastic with the chocolate browns. So I die cut it first out of the cardstock, and then I used a palette knife to coat the cardstock, and then set it aside and let it dry. Now, of course, I get impatient and I want to move on with my cards. So I did use my heat gun, and I have to say, you have to be really careful using different kinds of mixed media products. You don't know how they're going to stand up to heat. And I didn't put the heat on full on to the die cut for a long time. I would hit it, take it for just a few seconds, take it away, take it back on. And I had no problems heating it with the heat gun. If you heat it too long, I have a feeling it might bubble up like an acrylic paint would, but I did not have that problem. So I definitely sped up the process because I am very impatient. And now, once again, if you know me, I love foam tape. Everything is better with dimension. So I take some of my foam tape, I cut it down the middle, and I'm going to add quite a bit of it to the back of this Hooray die. I have to tell you, I did a live video, and you can go to my Everyday Expressions YouTube page. and look for live videos, and you'll see it there. The topic was tips and tricks on using large focal point dies. And one of the biggest tips I gave was using a drop shadow with these large dies. I don't know what it is about helping your eye focus, but adding a drop shadow really makes it stand out. And I did not do this on this card, and I wish that I had. So there's a little extra tip for you. When you do yours, use a drop shadow, and it's just an extra die cut in maybe a different color. Maybe the chocolate brown would have looked nice. And you add it behind, kind of dropped in behind the die cut. And it definitely adds interest to the card. So that white piece, you can see that I just adhered to the pink inked background, is the pierced blanket cover plate die. And I add that just for a little interest in the background. More foam tape, and then I'm going to adhere this to my chocolate brown base. And then we'll adhere the Hooray die. Now, I do not press this down fully. I just gently place it on my card because I want to be able to tuck a few of those chocolates behind and not just on top of that Hooray die. So I've added the sentiment into my Misty, and I ink it with one of the oxide browns. And once again, I have to tell you, this had a little bit of fade back with the ink color, and it did not come out as dark as I wish it had. It looks great on the card, but it's just one of those picky things that you notice once the card is finished. And especially in some of my pictures, I wish it had stayed a little bit darker. So keep that in mind. Something that may have helped is if I had then added some clear embossing powder to it and heat embossed it, or just used a darker ink or inked it several times and then let it dry. Now you can just see I'm going to kind of take my time and take all of the different pieces and layer them up, put them behind the Hooray die, put them on top of it, and just kind of scatter them around. And what I'm kind of looking at while I do this is knowing where I'm going to place the sentiment in the lower corner. With that large Hooray die, you still don't want to kind of cover up key parts of that die cut. So it's kind of tricky on figuring out what will be pleasing to the eye and how you can add these cute little pieces around without covering up so that someone can still see that it says Hooray. And I did not want to add chocolate pieces into the O's so that it looked like eyes in there either. So it's kind of a little placement game. And that's why either I would definitely plan on where you want them first before adhering them down. And you will not want to push the foam tape down if you place them behind the Hooray either. One thing that I like to keep in mind as I'm trying to figure out the design of a card are some of the important principles of design in art. And one thing that artists will talk about is rhythm or movement, and also repetition and pattern. And what that means is like using more than just one of something. That's your repetition. And also keeping things connected can also be pleasing to the eye. So you see, I placed one piece of chocolate behind the H, but then I layered a different piece or a contrasting piece over the top of Hooray. And that definitely adds interest to your overall design. And so you'll see that I keep that in mind. I'm layering up there. You'll see the sentiment down below. What can I layer behind? What can I layer above? And yet still be able to read that sentiment. It also, by layering and strategically placing these chocolates on the front of your card, it moves the eye around the focal point. And we obviously most people in the world, some cultures read right to left, but most cultures around the world read left to right. So when we can create movement across a design that kind of moves the eye left to right, that is also pleasing. So I try to keep a lot of these principles of design in art on my mind when I'm making decisions about placement. You can see here that as I'm trying to pick up the Hooray and layer some pieces here and there, a couple of my tools really helped this process. Even though I hadn't firmly pushed down the Hooray, of course that foam tape is pretty sticky. So I found that my reverse tweezers, which I dearly love, it's one of my favorite tools in my craft room. I use them all the time. My reverse tweezers and also even my craft pick there help to kind of pick up and place pieces behind the foam tape of the Hooray die. One thing that I don't think that I've pointed out in this process is that on some of the chocolates that I'm placing above the die cut piece, I have, if it's going to hang over the edge, I add a little foam square behind it off to one side if it's going to hang off of the Hooray. Because we added the foam tape to the Hooray, I want to make sure that the pieces that I'm adding to the top that might need stability have that, especially if this is going through the mail. And there we go. I've glued one more onto the front, and now it's just a matter of placing that sentiment. And I added, once again, like I said, just a couple pieces of foam to each end, knowing it's going to straddle the A and the Y. And I even add a little drop of glue to each side to give me some wiggle room in deciding exactly the placement. One other little tip is that if we had used one long sentiment, it would have looked really cute placed right between the who and the ray of that die cut. And there we have it. What do you think? I thought this was so fun creating chocolates from these little cookie cutouts. Thanks so much for watching today, and don't forget to check out that other video in my lives to see the tips for using large focal point dies. Have a great weekend, everyone.